She walked into the kitchen barefoot, damp hair clinging to her collarbone, the morning light turning her into something ethereal, and I forgot how to breathe. That Tuesday was supposed to be ordinary until her eyes locked with mine and the air thickened with something unspoken. I told myself she was just my roommate until the day she pulled me, wordless, into the shower. Let's uncover what really happened. The first time I truly saw Maya, not just as the person who paid half the rent and left her slightly damp towels on the bathroom floor, but as Maya was on a Tuesday, a ridiculously mundane Tuesday, the kind that usually blurs into the gray tapestry of the week without leaving a trace. I was hunched over my laptop at the small, scarred kitchen table, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee and wrestling with a particularly uncooperative spreadsheet that was threatening to derail my entire afternoon. The apartment was quiet, save for the rhythmic hum of the ancient refrigerator and the distant wail of a siren, a typical city soundtrack. She'd been my roommate for 3 months, a period marked by polite, if somewhat perfunctory, interactions. We operated on slightly different schedules. I was an early riser, a creature of habit, while Maya seemed to thrive in the crepuscular hours. Her movements, often a soft rustle in the apartment as I was already drifting off to sleep, or the faint clinking of a mug as she made tea when I was just waking. We exchanged pleasantries, notes about bills, the occasional shared sigh over the landlord's reluctance to fix the leaky faucet. She was tidy enough, paid her share on time, and possessed a collection of intriguing, slightly bohemian scarves she often left draped over the back of the sofa. That was the extent of my knowledge, the sum total of our cohabitation. On this particular Tuesday, however, the usual rhythm was disrupted. I heard her bedroom door creak open much earlier than usual, followed by the soft pad of her bare feet on the worn wooden floorboards of the hallway. I didn't look up immediately, too engrossed in my spreadsheet battle, but her presence registered a subtle shift in the apartment's atmosphere. Then she walked into the kitchen, and the world, or at least my perception of it, tilted on its axis. She wasn't wearing one of her usual oversized sweaters or faded band t-shirts. Instead, she had on a simple, thin cotton camisole, the kind that probably came in a pack of 3, and a pair of ridiculously short, frayed denim cutoffs. Her dark, shoulder-length hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was loose, still slightly damp from a shower, curling softly around her face and shoulders. The morning light, filtering through the grimy kitchen window, caught her in a way that seemed almost ethereal, highlighting the smooth column of her throat, the delicate curve of her collarbone, the surprisingly toned muscles in her arms as she reached for a glass from the cupboard. I found myself staring, my coffee cup halfway to my lips, the spreadsheet completely forgotten. It wasn't just that she looked different, though she did. It was as if I were seeing her for the first time, truly seeing her, stripped of the usual layers of clothing and casual indifference that had defined our interaction. Her skin, where it was exposed, looked impossibly soft, almost luminous. There was a smudge of what looked like charcoal pencil beneath one of her eyes, a lingering trace of the previous night that somehow made her look more vulnerable, more real. She turned, glass in hand, and her eyes met mine. They were a startling shade of hazel, flecked with gold, something I'd never properly noticed before. Usually, her gaze was quick, glancing, but now, perhaps because she was caught off guard by my uncharacteristic scrutiny, her eyes held mine for a fraction of a second longer than usual. A small, almost imperceptible frown creased her brow. "Morning," she said, her voice a little husky, still thick with sleep. It was a simple word, one we exchanged almost daily, but this time it sounded different, deeper, more resonant. "Morning," I managed, my own voice sounding strangely hoarse. I quickly looked back down at my laptop, my cheeks suddenly burning, a ridiculous, unwarranted blush creeping up my neck. I could feel her presence at the sink, the sound of water running, the soft clink of the glass as she set it down. Every mundane sound was amplified, charged with a new, unsettling significance. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, erratic rhythm that had nothing to do with caffeine. What was wrong with me? She was just my roommate. This was just a normal Tuesday morning. But nothing felt normal. The air in the kitchen felt thick, heavy, charged with an unspoken awareness. I could smell her, a faint, clean scent of soap and something else, something uniquely Maya, a fragrance that was both subtle and deeply unsettling to my suddenly overactive senses. I risked another quick glance. She was leaning against the counter, sipping her water, her gaze directed out the window, but I felt with an almost painful certainty that she was aware of my continued, albeit covert, observation. The way the thin cotton of her camisole clung slightly to the curve of her breasts, the way the frayed hem of her shorts revealed a tantalizing glimpse of her thighs, the vulnerability of her bare feet on the cool linoleum, every detail was suddenly, overwhelmingly potent. I was acutely aware of her as a woman, a physical presence in a way I had never been before. It was terrifying, and if I was being honest with myself, deeply shamefully exhilarating. She finished her water, rinsed the glass, and then, with another brief, unreadable glance in my direction, she was gone, padding softly back down the hallway to her room, leaving me alone in the suddenly too quiet kitchen, my coffee cold, my spreadsheet abandoned, my entire world subtly, irrevocably altered by the simple, accidental revelation of my roommate on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The shift in my perception of Maya, that Tuesday morning revelation, was like a stone dropped into a still pond, the ripples spreading outwards, subtly altering the entire landscape of our cohabitation. It wasn't that our interactions changed dramatically on the surface. We still maintained our polite, if somewhat distant, roommate dynamic, but for me, everything was different. Every encounter, however brief, however mundane, was now freighted with a new, heightened awareness, a secret, internal hum of observation, and a dawning, uncomfortable attraction. I found myself noticing things I had previously been oblivious to. The way she chewed on her lower lip when she was concentrating, a small, unconscious gesture that I found inexplicably endearing. The collection of silver rings she wore on her fingers, delicate and slightly tarnished, that would catch the light when she moved her hands. The surprisingly melodic quality of her laughter when she was on the phone with a friend, a sound that would drift from her room and make something in my chest ache with a strange, unnameable longing. Her scent became a constant, subtle presence in the apartment, a fragrance that I began to associate with a peculiar mix of comfort and a low-grade simmering anxiety. It was a clean, slightly earthy smell, like freshly turned soil after a spring rain, with an underlying hint of something sweet and musky that I couldn't quite identify but found increasingly, disturbingly alluring. I'd catch whiffs of it on the towels she left in the bathroom, on the scarves she draped over the sofa, even sometimes, faintly, in the shared air of the living room when she passed by. Each time, it would trigger a small internal jolt, a reminder of that Tuesday morning, of the way she had looked, of the unexpected surge of awareness she had ignited within me. My internal life became a secret theater of Maya-centric observation. I cataloged her habits, her routines, the small unconscious ways she moved through our shared space. I learned that she always made herself a cup of herbal tea before bed, the fragrant steam wafting down the hallway. I discovered she had a penchant for old vinyl records, the muffled sound of a scratchy blues singer often drifting from beneath her closed door late at night. I noticed the way she always kicked off her shoes by the doorway, leaving them in a small, untidy pile, a silent testament to her arrival home. These were trivial details, the kind of minutiae one inevitably learns about a person one lives with. But for me, they took on a disproportionate significance, each one a tiny piece in the increasingly complex puzzle of my fascination. I started to feel a strange, almost proprietary interest in her well-being, a concern that went beyond the bounds of typical roommate courtesy. If I heard her coughing in her room, I'd feel a pang of worry. If she seemed quieter than usual, I'd wonder if something was wrong. It was a subtle internal shift, one I tried to mask beneath a veneer of continued casual indifference, but it was there, a constant, low-level thrum of anxiety and a burgeoning, unwelcome tenderness. The apartment itself, our shared space, began to feel different, charged with a new potential, the narrow hallway we both traversed, the small kitchen where our paths occasionally crossed, the bathroom with its shared mirror and lingering traces of her presence. These ordinary spaces became imbued with a heightened sense of possibility, of a potential for interaction that left me feeling both eager and apprehensive. I became hyper aware of her body, of its physical presence in our apartment, the sound of her footsteps, the creak of her bedroom door, the muffled sounds of her moving around in her room. Each was a signal, a reminder that she was there, just a few feet away, a tangible, breathing reality that was increasingly occupying my thoughts. I'd find myself listening for her, my ears attuned to the subtle sounds of her existence, a habit I found both shameful and impossible to break. My dreams, too, began to be infiltrated by her presence. They were rarely explicit, not in a overtly sexual way, but they were filled with a strange, unsettling intimacy. Dreams where we would be talking, sharing secrets, our faces closed, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Dreams where her hand would brush mine and the contact would send a jolt of electricity through me, a sensation so vivid it would linger even after I woke, leaving me with a racing heart and a deep, aching sense of confusion and longing. I tried to dismiss it, to rationalize it. It was just proximity, I told myself, the inevitable result of sharing a small space with another human being. It was a phase, a weird blip, a temporary aberration in my usually well-ordered emotional landscape. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The intensity of my reaction to her, the way she had so effortlessly, so unconsciously captivated my attention, it felt significant, dangerous. And the most terrifying part was that I didn't know what to do about it. I couldn't talk to anyone. The very idea was mortifying. Chloe, my closest friend, was out of the question. How could I confess to her that I was developing these feelings for her roommate? The guilt alone was suffocating. So I kept it hidden, a secret burning ember in the core of my being, a constant low-grade fever that colored every interaction, every thought, every moment I spent in that apartment, an apartment that was increasingly feeling less like a shared space and more like a stage for my own private, unsettling drama. The internal battle raged. One part of me, the rational, sensible part, was appalled by the direction my thoughts were taking. This was Maya, my roommate, a person with whom I had a perfectly functional, if unremarkable, living arrangement. To sexualize her, to fantasize about her felt like a violation, a betrayal of the implicit trust that underpins any cohabitation. It was inappropriate, unprofessional, and just plain weird. This part of me urged caution, distance, a concerted effort to regain control over my wayward imagination. It reminded me of boundaries, of respect, of the potential for catastrophic awkwardness if my feelings were ever discovered, or worse, if I ever acted on them. Then there was the other part of me, the primal, instinctive part, the part that had been awakened that Tuesday morning and now refused to go back to sleep. This part was fascinated, intrigued, consumed by curiosity so intense, it bordered on obsession. It reveled in the stolen glances, the accidental touches, the subtle, intoxicating scent of her. It replayed every interaction, every nuance of her expression, every intonation of her voice, searching for hidden meanings, for reciprocal signs of interest, however faint, however imagined. This part of me didn't care about boundaries or appropriateness. It only cared about the raw, undeniable pull I felt towards her, a pull that was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. The guilt was a constant companion, a heavy cloak I couldn't seem to shed. Every time I caught myself staring at her a moment too long, every time my mind conjured an unwelcome, intimate fantasy, a fresh wave of shame would wash over me. I felt like a creep, a voyeur in my own home, my thoughts, a betrayal of the casual, respectful dynamic we had, until recently, maintained. I tried to suppress it, to push the feelings down, to starve them of oxygen. I'd busy myself with work, immerse myself in books, go for long, punishing runs, anything to distract myself from the constant low-level hum of awareness that Maya's presence generated within me. But it was like trying to hold water in my hands. The more I tried to contain it, the more it seemed to seep through the cracks, manifesting in unexpected ways. A sudden flush when she spoke to me, a fumbling of words, an awkwardness that was entirely new to our interactions. Sometimes she would look at me with a quizzical expression, a slight frown creasing her brow, as if she sensed something was different, that I was different. In those moments, my heart would hammer in my chest, a cold dread washing over me. Had I been too obvious? Had my carefully constructed facade of nonchalance slipped, revealing the turmoil beneath? The fear of exposure was acute, a constant, low-grade anxiety that made me even more self-conscious, more guarded. There were moments, however, when the suppression became almost impossible. Moments when she would emerge from her room in the morning, her hair still tousled from sleep, her eyes soft and unfocused, wearing one of her ridiculously soft-looking, oversized sweaters that made me long to touch the fabric to feel its warmth, or moments when she would be laughing, a genuine, unrestrained laugh, her head thrown back, her eyes sparkling, and the sound would be so unexpectedly beautiful, so infectious, that it would bypass all my defenses and hit me straight in the chest, leaving me breathless and aching with an emotion I couldn't name. One evening, I was in the kitchen, making dinner, when she came in, dressed for a run. She was wearing tight black leggings that hugged the curve of her thighs and a thin, sweat-wicking top that clung to her torso. Her hair was pulled back in a high ponytail, revealing the elegant line of her neck, the delicate shell of her ear. She looked incredible. Strong, athletic, her body a study in lean lines and subtle curves. She stretched, reaching her arms overhead, her top riding up slightly, revealing a tantalizing glimpse of her toned stomach. I found myself staring, my knife hovering motionless above the chopping board, my breath caught in my throat. The movement was unconscious, unstudied, yet it was profoundly, devastatingly sensual. She turned, catching my gaze, and for a fraction of a second our eyes locked. There was no curiosity in her expression this time, no surprise, just a calm, direct acknowledgement. And then she smiled, not a polite roommate smile, but a slow, knowing smirk, a flicker of something that looked an awful lot like amusement. Or was it something else? Something that sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity straight through me. My face flamed. I quickly looked away, my heart pounding, my mind reeling. Had she seen the desire in my eyes? Did she know the effect she had on me? The thought was both mortifying and strangely, perversely thrilling. She didn't say anything, just grabbed her water bottle and headed out the door, leaving me alone in the kitchen, my carefully constructed composure in tatters, the scent of her, faint but unmistakable, lingering in the air like a taunt. The encounter left me shaken, my resolve to suppress my feelings weaker than ever. It was becoming increasingly clear that this wasn't just a fleeting infatuation. This was something deeper, something more potent, something that was rapidly spiraling out of my control. And the thought of where it might lead, the abyss of forbidden desire that yawned before me, filled me with a potent cocktail of terror and a dark, irresistible excitement. The incident in the kitchen, her knowing smirk, the way my carefully constructed defenses had crumbled under her gaze, left me feeling raw and exposed. It was as if she had peeled back a layer, glimpsed the turmoil beneath my carefully maintained facade of nonchalance, and hadn't recoiled. If anything, that small, almost imperceptible smile had felt like an acknowledgement, or was I just projecting my own desperate hopes onto her? The uncertainty was maddening. In the days that followed, I found myself oscillating between periods of intense self-recrimination and moments of reckless, almost giddy hope. I'd vowed to myself to regain control, to be more guarded, to treat her with a cool professional distance, and then she'd do something, say something, look at me in a certain way, and all my carefully constructed resolutions would dissolve like sugar in hot water. One rainy Saturday afternoon, we found ourselves unexpectedly alone in the apartment. Chloe, our other roommate, who usually filled the weekends with her cheerful, chaotic energy, was away visiting her family. The rain lashed against the windows, a relentless, drumming rhythm that created a sense of enforced intimacy of being cocooned together in our small shared space. I was curled up on the sofa with a book, trying to lose myself in its pages, but my mind kept drifting, my senses hyper-attuned to Maya's presence in the apartment. I could hear her moving around in her room, the soft thud of a book being set down, the faint melody of some indie folk song she was playing. After a while, she emerged, wrapped in a large, fluffy bathrobe, her hair damp and tousled, a towel draped around her neck. She looked soft, vulnerable, almost childlike, a stark contrast to the usual cool, slightly bohemian vibe she projected. "Hey," she said, her voice a little shy. "Mind if I join you? My room's freezing." "Of course not," I replied, my heart giving a familiar, unwelcome lurch. I shifted over, creating space for her on the sofa, acutely aware of the sudden, intoxicating scent of soap and damp skin that accompanied her. She curled up at the other end of the sofa, tucking her feet beneath her, and picked up a magazine, but I could tell her attention wasn't really on it. The silence between us stretched, not awkward, but filled with a palpable, unspoken tension. The only sounds were the relentless drumming of the rain and the soft rustle of magazine pages. I tried to focus on my book, but the words blurred before my eyes. My awareness of her was a constant, distracting hum, a magnetic pull that made it impossible to concentrate. I could feel the warmth radiating from her body, even from a few feet away. I was intensely conscious of the way the bathrobe gapped slightly at her throat, revealing a tantalizing glimpse of her collarbone, of the way a few damp tendrils of hair clung to her temples. After what felt like an eternity, she spoke, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "So," she began, her gaze fixed on the magazine in her lap. "Chloe tells me you're a writer." I was surprised. Chloe rarely talked about my writing, which was mostly a private, rather angst-ridden pursuit. Yeah, I admitted, feeling a flush creep up my neck. "Sort of." I dabble. She looked up then, her hazel eyes meeting mine, and there was a genuine curiosity in her expression, a warmth that took me by surprise. "What kind of stuff do you write?" And so I found myself talking to her, really talking to her for the first time since she had moved in. I told her about the half-finished novel languishing on my hard drive, about the scraps of poetry I scribbled in notebooks, about my dreams of one day being published. I spoke hesitantly at first, unsure how much to reveal, but her interest seemed so genuine, her questions so thoughtful, that I found myself opening up, sharing things I rarely discuss with anyone. She listened intently, her gaze never leaving mine, nodding occasionally, a small, encouraging smile playing on her lips. She didn't offer platitudes or easy praise. Instead, she asked probing questions, challenged my assumptions, made me think about my work in new and unexpected ways. It was an intoxicating experience, this meeting of mine, this unexpected intellectual intimacy. For a while, I almost forgot about the physical attraction, about the forbidden desires that had been tormenting me. We were just two people, talking, connecting, sharing a passion for words and stories. But then, as the conversation deepened, as we delved into more personal territory, the underlying tension, the unspoken awareness began to resurface. We talked about loneliness, about the challenges of navigating relationships, about the search for meaning in a chaotic world. And as we spoke, I felt a profound sense of connection with her, a feeling that went beyond mere intellectual compatibility. It was as if she understood me, truly understood me, in a way that no one else ever had. At one point, she was talking about a difficult period in her own life, her voice tinged with a vulnerability that made my heart ache for her. And without thinking, I reached out and placed my hand on her arm, a gesture of comfort, of solidarity. Her skin was warm, surprisingly soft beneath the thick terry cloth of her bathrobe. She paused, her gaze dropping to my hand, then back up to my eyes. The air between us crackled, thick with unspoken emotions. The rain continued to lash against the windows, a wild elemental soundtrack to the storm brewing within the four walls of that room. Her eyes, those beautiful, enigmatic hazel eyes, searched mine, and I saw a reflection of my own turmoil, my own longing in their depth. She didn't pull her arm away. Instead, she leaned in, just slightly, her body angling towards mine, her scent enveloping me, intoxicating me. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. I knew with a terrifying, exhilarating certainty that we were on the verge of something that could change everything. The moment stretched, taut, and fragile, filled with an almost unbearable anticipation. Her lips parted slightly, as if she were about to speak, but no words came. There was only the sound of our breathing, shallow and uneven, and the relentless drumming of the rain, a wild, primitive beat that seemed to echo the frantic rhythm of our hearts. The prolonged contact of my hand on Maya's arm, the subtle shift of her body towards mine, the charged silence broken only by the storm outside. It was all building to an unbearable crescendo. The air in the living room felt thick enough to cut with a knife, heavy with unspoken desires and a dangerous, thrilling anticipation. Her gaze, locked with mine, was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, vulnerability, curiosity, and something else, something darker, more primal, that mirrored the hunger churning within me. I could feel the warmth of her skin seeping into my palm, a searing brand that sent tremors up my arm and into the very core of my being. The soft terry cloth of her bathrobe was an inadequate barrier against the heat that seemed to emanate from her, a heat that was both physical and emotional. My thumb, as if with a will of its own, began to move, stroking the soft skin of her forearm in a slow, almost hypnotic rhythm. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture, yet it felt laden with an enormous significance, a silent acknowledgement of the forbidden territory we were now unequivocally treading upon. I saw her swallow, a quick, nervous movement in the elegant column of her throat. Her pupils, already dark in the dim, rainy afternoon light, seemed to expand, swallowing the golden flecks, leaving her eyes looking like deep, fathomless pools. Her lips, slightly parted, glistened faintly. I wanted to kiss her. The urge was so powerful, so overwhelming, that it was a physical ache in my chest, a tightening in my throat. I wanted to taste her, to feel the softness of her lips against mine, to lose myself in the intoxicating oblivion of her embrace. But fear held me captive, a cold, paralyzing counterpoint to the heat that was consuming me. Fear of rejection, fear of the consequences, fear of shattering the fragile, precious connection we had forged in the intimacy of that rainy afternoon. And yet, the fear was also a strange kind of aphrodisiac, adding a sharp, illicit thrill to the already potent cocktail of emotions swirling within me. Maya, I whispered, her name a fragile breath on my lips, the first time I had dared to speak it aloud in such an intimate context. It felt both strange and intoxicatingly familiar, like a word I had known in a dream. She didn't respond, not with words, but her eyes, those beautiful, expressive hazel eyes, spoke volume. They were filled with a yearning that mirrored my own, a silent, desperate plea. Her hand, the one that wasn't captive beneath mine, lifted slowly, hesitantly, and reached towards my face. Her fingers, cool and trembling slightly, gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, her touch sending a jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity through my entire body. Her fingertips lingered for a moment, caressing the sensitive skin behind my ear, and I closed my eyes, a soft sigh escaping my lip. It was an almost unbearable intimacy, this simple, tender gesture, yet it felt more profound, more arousing than any overt sexual advance could have been. When I opened my eyes, her face was inches from mine, so close I could see the tiny, almost invisible freckles scattered across the bridge of her nose, the delicate tracery of veins beneath the translucent skin of her eyelids. Her breath, warm and sweet, mingled with mine. The scent of her, that intoxicating blend of soap and damp skin and something uniquely Maya, filled my senses, making me feel dizzy, lightheaded. "Alex," she murmured, her voice a low, husky caress, a sound that vibrated through me, igniting every nerve ending. And then she leaned in, slowly, deliberately, and her lips met mine. The first touch was soft, tentative, a question asked and answered in the silent language of touch. Her lips were warm, surprisingly firm, tasting faintly of the herbal tea she had been drinking earlier, and something else, something uniquely her, something that was rapidly becoming my favorite flavor in the world. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved, suspended in that electrifying moment of first contact. Then, as if a dam had finally broken, the kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more demanding. Her other hand came up to cradle my face, her fingers tangling in my hair, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us, until our bodies were pressed together, a desperate, searing embrace. A low groan rumbled in her chest, a sound that was both an admission of pleasure and a cry of surrender. I melted into her, my own arms snaking around her waist, holding her tight, as if I were afraid she might disappear, that this moment, this precious, forbidden moment, might be nothing more than a dream. The book I had been holding clattered to the floor, forgotten. The rain lashed against the windows, a wild, elemental soundtrack to the storm raging within. The world outside, with its rules, its judgments, its inevitable consequences, ceased to exist. There was only this, the heat, the pressure, the intoxicating taste of her, the feeling of her body yielding against mine. Her tongue met mine, a slow, deliberate dance that sent shivers of pleasure coursing through me. It was a kiss of unspoken longing, of suppressed desire finally unleashed, a kiss that spoke of months of stolen glances, of charged silences, of a connection that defied logic, that defied convention, that defied everything we knew to be right. We stumbled, a tangle of limbs and soft terry cloth, our mouths still locked, and somehow ended up half lying, half sitting on the sofa, our bodies pressed together in a desperate, urgent embrace. The bathrobe had fallen open, revealing the smooth, pale skin of her thighs, the delicate curve of her hip, and my hand, as if with a will of its own, slid beneath the fabric, my fingers tracing the warm, soft skin, sending fresh waves of sensation through her, through me. She gasped against my mouth, her body arching into my touch, her hips moving in a subtle, instinctive rhythm against mine. This was madness, glorious, terrifying, exhilarating madness, and I never wanted it to end. The kiss was a universe, a world unto itself, a vortex of sensation and emotion that swallowed me whole. Maya's mouth was an exploration, a revelation. One moment tender, the next demanding, her tongue, a silken invader that mapped the contours of my own mouth with an intoxicating expertise. The soft terry cloth of her bathrobe was both a barrier and a tantalizing hint of the skin beneath, a landscape I was suddenly, overwhelmingly desperate to chart. Her hands were everywhere, not frantic, but purposeful, knowing. They slid from my face, down my neck, her fingers tracing the line of my collarbone, sending shivers of anticipation cascading through me. One hand found its way beneath my t-shirt, her palm flat against the bare skin of my stomach, a searing brand that made me gasp. Her touch was cool at first, then quickly warm, her fingers spreading out, exploring, learning the shape of me. I could feel the slight roughness of her fingertips, a delicious friction against my sensitized skin. The rain outside had intensified, the drumming on the roof, a primal rhythm that seemed to sync with the frantic beat of our hearts. The dim, gray light filtering through the windows cast the living room in a shadowy, intimate glow, cocooning us in our own private world, a world where the rules of the outside didn't apply. My own hands were not idle. They were tangled in her damp hair, soft and fragrant, pulling her closer, deepening the kiss, needing more, always more. I could feel the lean strength of her back beneath the bath, the subtle shift of her muscles as she moved against me. The scent of her was overwhelming, a heady cocktail of soap, damp skin, and that underlying musky sweetness that was uniquely hers. A fragrance that was now indelibly imprinted on my senses, forever associated with this moment, this transgression, this surrender. She broke the kiss, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her forehead resting against mine. Her eyes, when they met mine, were dark and luminous, filled with a raw, untamed hunger that mirrored my own. "Alex," she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Desire, certainly, but also something else. Something that looked almost like fear, or was it awe? "We shouldn't be doing this." Her words were a token protest, a last-ditch nod to the boundaries we were so spectacularly demolishing, but there was no conviction in her voice, No real attempt to pull away. If anything, her body pressed closer, her hips moving in a slow, sinuous rhythm against mine that sent a fresh wave of heat crashing through me. I know, I breathed, my own voice equally unsteady. But I can't stop. And it was true. I was caught in a current too strong to resist, a tide of longing and desire that was sweeping me away, and the terrifying, exhilarating truth was that I didn't want to be saved. I wanted to drown in it, to lose myself completely in the intoxicating depths of her embrace. She kissed me again, a hard, desperate kiss that tasted of rain and longing and the bittersweet tang of forbidden fruit. Her hand, the one that had been on my stomach, slid lower, her fingers tracing the waistband of my jeans, a teasing, tantalizing exploration that made my breath hitch. I arched into her touch, a silent invitation, my body trembling with a mixture of anticipation and a delicious, almost unbearable sensitivity. Every nerve ending was alive, screaming for her touch, for the release that I knew only she could provide. The bathrobe had fallen completely open now, revealing the soft swell of her breasts, the gentle curve of her stomach, the dark, mysterious shadow between her thighs. She was beautiful, achingly, breathtakingly beautiful. A pagan goddess bathed in the stormlight, and she was mine, in this moment, in this stolen sacred space. My hand moved, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence, to explore the newly revealed landscape of her body. Her skin was impossibly soft, warm, and yielding beneath my touch. I traced the delicate line of her collarbone, the curve of her breast, my fingers brushing against her nipple, which hardened instantly at my touch. She gasped, a sharp, involuntary sound, her head falling back, exposing the elegant line of her throat, a gesture of complete and utter vulnerability, of profound trust. And in that moment, seeing her so undone, so open, so exquisitely responsive to my touch, a wave of fierce, protective tenderness washed over me, mingling with the raw, desperate hunger that consumed me. This was more than just lust, more than just a physical craving. This was something else, something deeper, something that terrified me even more than the potential consequences of our actions. This was the precipice, the point of no return, and as I lowered my head to taste the salt-sweet skin of her throat, I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone and thrilled me to the core, that I was already falling. The world had narrowed to the confines of the sofa, to the dim, storm-lit living room, to the intoxicating reality of Maya's body beneath my hands, against my lips. Her skin tasted of rain and salt and a unique, musky sweetness that was purely her. As my mouth explored the delicate curve of her throat, I could feel the frantic pulse beating beneath her skin, a wild, erratic rhythm that mirrored my own. Her hands were in my hair, her fingers alternately clenching and stroking, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps that fanned across my cheek. The soft terry cloth of her bathrobe was bunched around her waist, a forgotten barrier. My own t-shirt had been rucked up, exposing my stomach to the cool air and the searing heat of her returning caress. Her fingers, nimble and knowing, danced across my ribs, sending shivers of anticipation down my spine, before moving lower, tracing the waistband of my jeans with an agonizing slowness. I arched against her, a silent plea, my body alive with a desperate, urgent need. The rain outside continued its relentless assault, a wild, primal symphony that seemed to underscore the untamed nature of our embrace. Each flash of lightning illuminated the room in a stark, fleeting brilliance, freezing us in a series of illicit, passionate tableaux. Maya, I breathed against her skin, her name, a desperate incantation, a prayer to a goddess I hadn't known existed until she had walked into my life. She responded by tightening her grip in my hair, tilting my head back, her mouth finding mine once more, in a kiss that was raw, hungry, almost brutal in its intensity. It was a kiss that spoke of months of suppressed longing, of stolen glances, of unspoken desires, finally, irrevocably unleashed. There was no tenderness in it now, only a fierce, consuming need. Her hand, the one that had been teasing the waistband of my jeans, slid beneath the denim, her fingers finding the bare skin of my hip. Her touch was electric, a jolt that made me cry out against her mouth. She didn't stop there. Her fingers moved with a slow, deliberate confidence, tracing the line of my hip bone, dipping into the sensitive hollow above, before sliding around to cup my buttock, her grip firm, possessive. I was on fire, every nerve ending, screaming, my body a taut, quivering bowstring of desire. I fumbled with the button of her jeans. No, she was still in the bathrobe. That was me in jeans. My mind a confusing haze of sensation and escalating arousal. My hands found the tie of her bathrobe, and with a single, decisive tug, I pulled it undone. The garment fell open completely, revealing her body to my hungry gaze. In the intermittent flashes of lightning, I saw the soft swell of her breasts, the gentle curve of her stomach, the dark, inviting triangle of hair between her thighs. She was exquisite, a study in shadows and light, her skin glowing with a pearlescent sheen. I lowered my head, my lips tracing a path from her throat, down her sternum, to the valley between her breasts. Her skin was impossibly soft, her scent intoxicating. I could feel her heart hammering against my own, a frantic, synchronized rhythm. She gasped as my mouth closed over one hardened nipple, my tongue teasing, tormenting, until she was writhing beneath me, her fingers clenching and unclenching in my hair, soft, desperate moans escaping her lips. This was a new territory for me, this raw, untamed exploration of another woman's body, but it felt right, instinctive, as if some hidden part of me had always known this path, had always yearned for this connection. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation, only a deep, resonant hum of recognition, of coming home. Her hands slid down my back, her fingers tracing the curve of my spine before moving lower, cupping my ass, pulling me tighter against her, her hips beginning to move in a slow, sinuous rhythm that mirrored my own. The friction of our bodies, skin against skin, denim against terry cloth, was an almost unbearable pleasure, a delicious torment that pushed me closer and closer to the Alex, she gasped, her voice thick with unshed pleasure. Please, I need. She didn't finish the sentence, but I knew. I knew what she needed because it was the same thing I craved with every fiber of my being. Release, oblivion, the shattering, transcendent peace that lay on the other side of this storm of desire. And as the thunder cracked overhead, a deafening primal roar, I moved, positioning myself above her, ready to answer her unspoken plea, ready to lose myself completely in the wild, tempestuous beauty of her surrender. The shift in our positions, me now poised above Maya, was seamless, a natural progression in the urgent choreography of our desire. The storm outside mirrored the one within, lightning flashes briefly illuminating her face, contorted in a mask of exquisite anticipation, her lips parted, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. Her eyes, those captivating hazel pools, were dark and dilated, fixed on mine with an intensity that was almost unbearable. In their depths, I saw a reflection of my own fierce hunger, a shared vulnerability that transcended the physical act we were about to embark upon. Her hands, which had been gripping my hips, slid upwards, her fingers playing across my back, pulling me down, urging me closer. The soft, yielding expanse of her body beneath me was an invitation, a landscape I was desperate to explore, to claim, to worship. I lowered my head, my lips finding hers once more, a deep, possessive kiss that sealed our unspoken pact. Her taste was intoxicating, a heady mix of her unique essence and the metallic tang of our shared arousal. My own clothes felt like an unbearable constraint, a barrier between my skin and hers. With a low growl of frustration, I pulled back just enough to shrug off my t-shirt, letting it fall to the floor beside her discarded bathrobe. The cool air of the storm-swept room on my bare skin was a shock, heightening my senses, making me even more acutely aware of the heat radiating from her body. Her gaze raked over me, a slow, appreciative appraisal that sent a fresh wave of heat coursing through my veins. A small, almost predatory smile touched her lips. Beautiful, she whispered, her voice a husky caress that made my knees weak. My hands went to the button of my jeans, my fingers fumbling, clumsy, with a desperate, urgent need. She watched me, her eyes never leaving mine, her own anticipation a palpable force in the charged air. The denim felt rough, restrictive, and unwelcome impediment. Finally, the button gave way, the zipper sliding down with a soft, rasping sound that seemed deafening in the sudden stillness between thunderclap. I kicked the jeans off, along with my underwear, a sense of liberation washing over me as the last barrier between us was removed. Now, it was just skin against skin, heat against heat, need against need. I settled myself between her thighs, her legs parting to welcome me, her body arching instinctively to meet mine. The first contact of our bare skin, slick with a fine sheen of perspiration, was electric, a jolt that made us both gasp. Her hands gripped my shoulders, her fingers digging into my flesh, as if to anchor herself against the storm of sensation that was about to break. I moved slowly at first, a tentative exploration, my hips beginning a gentle rocking rhythm against hers. Her eyes fluttered closed, a soft moan escaping her lips, her head thrashing slightly on the cushion. The sound, so raw, so uninhibited, was an incredible aphrodisiac, fueling my own escalating arousal, driving me to a new level of desperation. My lips left hers, tracing a searing path down her neck to the delicate curve of her collarbone, then lower to the soft swell of her breasts. Her skin tasted of salt and rain and an underlying sweetness that was intoxicating. I suckled at her nipple, gently at first, then with increasing urgency, my tongue and teeth teasing, tormenting, until she was writhing beneath, her fingers tangling in my hair, her hips bucking against mine in a frantic, desperate rhythm. "Alex! Oh God, Alex!" she gasped, her voice a ragged, broken plea. The sound of my name on her lips, spoken with such raw, unadulterated pleasure, was the most erotic thing I had ever heard. It pushed me over the edge, shattering the last vestiges of my control. My movements became more urgent, more demanding, my hips grinding against hers with a primal, untamed force. The friction of our bodies, slick with sweat and mutual desire, was an almost unbearable pleasure, a delicious torment that was rapidly pushing us both towards the brink. I could feel the tension coiling within her, within me, a tightly wound spring of anticipation, of an almost painful need. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, her body trembling, her nails digging into my back, leaving fiery trails in their wake. The world narrowed to this single incandescent point of contact, to the feel of her body moving beneath mine, to the sound of her ragged breathing, to the intoxicating scent of her arousal. Nothing else mattered. There was only this fierce, desperate, beautiful act of mutual surrender. And then I felt it, the first subtle tremor, the telltale clenching of her inner muscles, the sharp, indrawn breath that signaled her approaching release. It was like a signal to my own body, a cue that it was safe to let go, to surrender to the overwhelming tide of sensation. With a final, desperate thrust, a guttural cry torn from my own throat, I followed her over the edge into the abyss of oblivion, the world exploding in a blinding flash of white-hot pleasure, a shattering, transcendent release that left me gasping, trembling, clinging to her as if she were the only solid thing in a universe that had just been ripped apart and reassembled. The aftershocks of our shared climax rippled through us for long, shuddering moments, our bodies still intimately entwined, slick with sweat, our breath coming in ragged, uneven gasps. The storm outside had finally begun to subside, the thunder retreating into the distance, the rain softening to a gentle, almost melancholic patter against the window pane. A profound, bone-deep weariness settled over me, a languid, delicious exhaustion that left my limbs feeling heavy, my mind blissfully empty. I collapsed against Maya, my head resting in the damp hollow of her shoulder, her arms coming around me, holding me close, her heartbeat a slow, steady rhythm beneath my ear, a comforting counterpoint to the fading thunder of my own. We lay like that for a long time, wrapped in a cocoon of shared intimacy, the silence in the room broken only by the soft sound of our breathing and the gentle drumming of the rain. There were no words. None were needed. Everything that had needed to be said had been spoken in the silent, eloquent language of our bodies. As the last vestiges of the storm receded, and the first faint hints of a watery dawn began to seep through the curtains, a new, more unsettling reality began to assert itself. The intoxicating haze of passion started to dissipate, replaced by a dawning awareness of what we had done, of the lines we had crossed, of the irrevocable nature of our shared transgression. A cold knot of anxiety began to form in my stomach, a stark contrast to the lingering warmth that still suffused my body. This was Maya, my roommate. This was our shared apartment, a space that had, until last night, been governed by a set of unspoken, yet clearly understood rules and boundaries. And we had just shattered them all spectacularly, irrevocably. What now? The question hung in the air, unspoken but palpable, a heavy, ominous cloud that threatened to eclipse the fragile beauty of what we had just shared. I could feel Maya stir beside me, her body tensing slightly, as if she, too, were grappling with the dawning implications of our action. She shifted, propping herself up on an elbow, her dark, tousled hair falling across her face, her hazel eyes, when they met mine, filled with a complex, unreadable emotion, desire, certainly, but also something else, something that looked an awful lot like apprehension, regret. The silence stretched, taut and fragile, the intimacy of the night before giving way to a new, uncertain awkwardness. The easy, uninhibited connection we had shared seemed to be receding, replaced by a dawning awareness of the complexities, the potential for pain that lay ahead. Alex, she began, her voice a little hoarse, a little hesitant. She paused, as if searching for the right words, words that could somehow bridge the chasm that was suddenly, alarmingly opening up between us. I waited, my heart pounding, a cold dread seeping into my bone. The magic of the night was fading, and in its place, the harsh, unforgiving light of day was beginning to reveal the true, complicated nature of our situation. What had felt so right, so inevitable, in the heat of the moment, now seemed fraught with peril, with the potential for heartbreak and devastating consequences. The future, which had seemed so distant, so irrelevant just a few short hours ago, was now looming large, a shadowy, uncertain presence that filled me with a profound sense of unease. The shared intimacy of the night, the raw, uninhibited connection, had been replaced by a fragile, uncertain dawn. Maya's voice, when she finally spoke again, was barely a whisper, laced with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Last night, she said, her gaze dropping to the tangled sheets that covered us, was unexpected. Unexpected. The word hung in the air between us, a masterpiece of understatement. It was so much more than unexpected. It was earth-shattering, life-altering, a seismic shift in the very foundations of our relationship, of my own understanding of myself. Yeah, I managed, my own voice equally unsteady. It was. The silence descended again, thicker this time, heavier, filled with the unspoken questions, the unvoiced fears that churned within both of us. I watched her searching her face for some clue, some indication of what she was thinking, what she was feeling. Her expression was guarded, her usual enigmatic mask slowly reasserting itself, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, but one that sent a chill of apprehension through me. Was she regretting it? Was she already distancing herself, retreating back into the safety of her carefully constructed reserve? The thought was like a physical blow, a sharp, painful ache in my chest. Are you okay? I asked, the question feeling ridiculously inadequate, a pathetic attempt to bridge the widening chasm between us. She finally looked at me, her hazel eyes clouded, unreadable. I don't know, Alex, she admitted, her voice raw with a vulnerability that tore at my heart. I honestly don't know. This is a lot to process. A lot to process. That was certainly true. My own mind was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, the lingering, intoxicating memory of her touch, the fierce, possessive tenderness I felt towards her, mingled with a growing sense of guilt, of fear, of a profound, unsettling uncertainty about what the future held. What does this mean? I blurted out, the words tumbling from my lips before I could stop them. For us? For this? I gestured vaguely between us, encompassing the tangled sheets, the shared intimacy, the unspoken promises that hung in the air. She sighed, a long, weary sound, and ran a hand through her already disheveled hair, a gesture of frustration, of confusion. I wish I had an answer for you, Alex, she said, her voice filled with a sadness that mirrored my own. But I don't. This is new territory for me too. New territory. It was a vast, uncharted wilderness, fraught with peril and possibility. and we were standing on its precipice alone, together, with no map, no compass, only the lingering, intoxicating memory of the storm we had weathered, the storm we had created. The pale morning light filtering through the curtains felt harsh, unforgiving, exposing the rawness of our emotions, the fragility of our situation. The magic of the night was fading, replaced by the cold, hard reality of the day. We were roommates. We lived together. We shared a space, a life that was now irrevocably altered. How could we go back to the way things were? How could we pretend that last night hadn't happened, that the lines hadn't been blurred, shattered, redrawn in the most intimate, most profound way imaginable? We need to be careful, she said finally, her voice quiet but firm, her gaze meeting mine with a new, unsettling intensity. Chloe, her name, a sharp, painful reminder of the other person in this equation, the innocent bystander who would inevitably be caught in the crossfire if our secret was ever discovered. The guilt, which had been a dull ache, now flared into a sharp stabbing pain. I know, I whispered, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. She can never know. Never, Maya affirmed, her voice resolute. This, whatever this is, it has to stay between us, a secret, our secret. Our secret. The words, which should have felt intimate, conspiratorial, instead felt like a sentence, a condemnation to a life of deception, of hidden desires, of a love that could never be acknowledged, never be celebrated. A heavy silence descended upon us, filled with the weight of that shared secret, with a dawning realization of the complexities, the potential for heartbreak that lay ahead. The future, which had seemed so bright, so full of promise just a few short hours ago, now felt shrouded in a fog of uncertainty, of fear. As I lay there, beside her, in the cool light of that uncertain dawn, I knew that our lives had been irrevocably changed. The storm had passed, but its aftermath, the debris of our shattered boundaries, of our awakened desires, would take a long, long time to clear. And I wasn't sure, not at all sure, if we would ever find our way back to solid ground.